Hey gang, welcome to the extended version of the StitchLock drawing. This is a Toxic World character I've been trying to develop. I've actually got a lot of different characters I've developed over the years. Um, this Toxic Realms is kind of a new take on an old idea or an old concept that me and my buddies came up with back in the day, playing RPG games, like Dungeons and Dragons or Ninja Turtles or Heroes. Let's see what else. Car Wars. So this is kind of like a world that mixes a lot of that together. So we got some mutants. We're gonna have some souped up cars with armament and weaponry. Um, Also deep space travelers. Uh, the scene I was designing this drawing for, or this concept, is part of a cantina scene. Um, there's going to be a diner that's, well, I don't want to tell too much about it, but anyway, there's a diner, like a refueling dock, and a lot of haulers stop through, on their way through to other solar systems or, down to the planet. Um, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to talk through this whole video, but I figured, what the hell, I'll give it a shot. Let's see. A lot of times when I start my drawings, I like to do kind of a proportion and layout, just represented by some basic shapes, circles, or whatever the closest shape is to the character or piece that I'm drawing. Um, I know I've seen some people just go into full detail right off the bat in one section and just kind of work their way across the page. It's an interesting style. I think I developed my technique from trying to, like a lot of us did, is reading those how to draw comic books, instructional books, and just learning about layout to, better proportion things and for scale and, obviously for human anatomy, proportioning. And I've been learning more lately about alignment with, eyes and nose and mouth, and different shapes that I wasn't aware of before. For me, it just had more to do with having drawn for so many years. You just kind of develop a technique for how you put that together, but there's almost like a mathematical way to figure out exactly where something should be placed. Not that I like to stick to rules. I'm quite the rebel, I should say. But it can be helpful, especially to keep things symmetrical or in proportion, or um, yeah, even if you're going to start adding lighting to kind of know where the lighting is going to hit and where the shadows are going to fall. So sometimes if you get your proportions and angles properly mapped out, it's a little easier to figure out, how those shapes are going to generate shadowing and highlights. I don't know. Part of me is wondering if I should just speak logically and to the point, or, if I should go to the goofy side. Oh my god, you've got to do goofy. Oi, you're a right wanker. That's what I think. Well, anyway, maybe I'll just, for now, keep it to the point. Let's see, what else could I talk about this? So obviously, the StitchLock, he's like a mutant, and he's had some cybernetic enhancement done. Um, he was supposed to be um, a born mutant, so some people in the government have their eye on him, and unbeknownst to him, certain things unfold that he doesn't really realize are from undercover agencies that are kind of tracking him. Um, but he himself is like an ex-military, special forces trained kind of person, because I don't know, why not? Why not make him a badass? I mean, he's going into deep space. You never know what you're gonna run into out in the outer reaches, I suppose. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of different stories um, that are going to be like mini stories within this Toxic Realms. I think that's why I chose the title. We're going to have the diner, which is called the terminal, and then we're going to have different factions and groups within, with different their own stories. One of them is the terminal velocity angels, um, and then just stories that go along with some of these deep sea haulers and the various other beings that they've come in contact with and share their stories. Um, this is supposed to be, kind of a post-apocalyptic world. So sci-fi meets post-apocalyptic. But just as far as art styles, I kind of like to throw in some of like the steampunk styles. Um, and I really love mutants. I was always a big fan of Ninja Turtles and their game. When their game came out and you saw all these different creatures, I thought, wow, that's really cool. Um, some of my absolute favorite characters are like shapeshifters, though, like from old folklore, like werewolves, or here in Hawaii, there's what are called kupua, which are, there's rat men and dog men and pig men and shark men, and that's kind of dependent on what part of the island you're from. Um, so, yeah, the whole mutant thing, I really love that. And then I'm also going to have some of the stories maybe blend over and touch into crossover into another IP, which is Brat Force. So in the Brat Force series, um, again, I didn't want to divulge too much information, but I've been working on it for so long. Like I've copywritten the story back in 2013, and I've been sitting on these videos for so long because I think my perfectionism has kind of held me from releasing them. But now I'm just like, what have I got to lose? I don't have any fans, so I certainly can't lose any, right? Hopefully I can pick some up. But um, yeah, the Brat Force, again, it's kind of a sci fi story, but more based around like a youthful feel. These neighborhood kids, find some super tech, at a collapse at a job site. So we're dealing with otherworldly beings, wormholes, super armor, uh, and then also like shapeshifters and different, fantasy creatures and stuff, depending on, where these warp gates take them. So we're going to have a little crossover at some point with Brat Force and Toxic Realms, but that's will be a lot further down the road. Um, Brat Force right now is actually a 3D, fully animated series am working on, and then Toxic Realms is actually going to be more of a digital comic. So there's going to be narration and some motion graphics, some light animation. I decided on that just because it takes quite some time. I'm just a one man team right now, so it takes a while to build these animations out, and especially if I'm actually building all the characters and content myself, which as of late I've decided, what, I don't need to do everything. I don't have to write, produce, direct, film, build all the content. Why not just buy some modular packs or buy some characters you know, um, or at least partially made characters to help speed things along. But anyway, that's just kind of a personal realization I'm coming to. It's spreading myself a little too thin, and so therefore I'm not getting enough content out quick enough. So I'm going to try and shift things around so I can maintain a constant release of content and hopefully, get this channel finally, raging how I think it potentially could be. And then I had mentioned, I've also got, a printing company, Wildside Printing. And so I'm going to have links in the descriptions to a lot of the designs in this on this channel. So pretty much most of the things that I have on the channel will be available for sale on my website in the form of like T-shirts, and then for certain things, are they'll be available in 3D print, um, and then also I'm gonna just have part of my background is working in the film industry and making prosthetic makeup. So I'm actually going to have some prosthetic masks and makeup available for sale on my website as well. And I'll have time lapse videos of those things as well, but they'll be on a different playlist. They'll be on the Chaos Forge playlist. For this one, I'm just trying to separate everything out. Like, I didn't want to make completely separate channels for every IP I've got. I just figured if I separated them into their own playlists, it might keep people, entertained and yet not too thrown off by, hey, why am I suddenly seeing clay sculpture or ZBrush sculpture when I was watching pencil drawing? So, trying to keep the playlist separate and just let you know about them. So if you want to bounce over to another playlist and check out what's going on there, um, yeah. Anyway, I kind of ran out of stuff to say, but I will probably just put some music on, and if I think of anything else, I will chime back in. I guess I could talk a little bit about the drawing itself. I mean, I love using mechanical pencils. I don't like really sharp tips. I try to go with the heaviest ones, like a 7 or 9 millimeter, if I can get them. And then the paper I'm drawing onto is uh, they're like for making booklets. So it's like an interesting kind of I don't know what, poster paper. It's got like a crosshatch texture to it. Not quite as heavy as like a canvas, but it's pretty textured. Um, and then the surface is designed to take ink, so it's kind of glossy. I don't know if it's got some kind of adhesive properties, but it makes it very difficult to see the drawing on the camera. It doesn't pick up. I mean, at least on this drawing, I'm actually recording on an iPhone. Um, on the most recent drawing I just did, which I'll be uploading soon, this it's a cyborg, a female cyborg, kind of a ninja motif. I used a different camera. I usually use Panasonic cameras. I've got some really good cameras. For part of it, I used like an LX10, and then for another part, I was using the GH4. But I'm also on the other drawing. I'm using a different kind of paper, so I need to kind of test back and forth. Um, I really like this paper I'm using in this, or this cardstock I'm using in this drawing you're watching right now. I like to draw very lightly. I have a very soft hand when I'm drawing. I don't press very hard at all. Um, and this paper, yeah, it's unforgiving. If you push a little too hard, you get some really dark marks. And yeah, anyway, but it's fun to draw on. I like trying out different kinds of combinations. And then again, even with the mechanical pencils, you can get different density lead, besides the thickness, and then just trying it onto different papers and stuff like that. Um, I think I might show a time lapse video of taking this drawing to the full color illustration, which I would be doing in Photoshop just for the speed of it, um, and then using some textures and specialized custom brush tips and stuff to speed up texturing and getting a really cool look to it, along with a lot of different blending layers and stuff like that. Yeah, another one is in the past I always wouldn't draw from reference. I don't know why. Like it seems silly now. It's like everything that we know how to draw, it's because we've seen it somewhere in the past. So I mean, it's rare that somebody has a photographic memory, so why not just look up what it is, and take a peek at maybe how the light hits it or how, different things behave. I mean, all the masters do, you know, from ancient times, Leonardo, uh, Michelangelo, And my favorites are like Frazetta or Boris, or you know they all use reference materials, and some very specialized reference materials, even Rockwell, and these true greats. Um, then I even read, like a lot of the comic artists, they'll actually, this is back before internet, would cut out or tear out pages of their favorite art and paste them on the walls all around inside of their studio, to help keep them locked into a certain style or a certain look, or to inspire them in a certain way. It's sometimes when you go into a drawing and you have a certain mindset, it's interesting. It affects the way the drawing turns out. Depending, it's almost like your mood can shift the way the drawing is. And like anybody, I've got my good days and bad days. Sometimes it just flows, and other days it's like pulling teeth. It's a struggle. But having worked professionally for so long, mostly designing T-shirts and designing for other companies, just because you're having a bad day, you can't stop. You've got to figure out how to work through it. And so, as of late, sorry, I kind of got a little sidetracked there, but I decided, what, I'm going to use reference art. Why not? You know, um, Especially if we're going to have to start competing with AI now. And they're using all the art from the masters and compiling them together. So, we're going to have to use some reference materials if we're going to hope to compete with the AI systems, the generative systems. But anyway, so yeah, for different textures and whatnot, I'll use reference materials. And I'm even thinking for, when pros do their Photoshop rendering, in a lot of cases, just for speed, especially if you're working for a studio and everything's due yesterday, you can borrow textures from different various either real photos and run them through the filter gallery and shift them, or using a stamp tool and borrowing different textures, or using them to create your own brush for, quickly putting a big, texturing down and stuff like that. Anyway, I think I've kind of run out of things to say. I'll chill out for a minute and see if anything else comes to mind. Actually, no, I guess I'll end anyway, the dialogue part. Just letting people know, please like and subscribe. I've been drawing and designing for, quite some time, and I'd love to do this more, more often than not. If it could actually produce an income, I could put more time into creating content for YouTube. Um, and then also, oh yeah, comment. Let me know what you think of the drawing, or if you'd like to see, something drawn. Um, I mean, for right now, a few of the initial, first drawings going to be releasing will have to do with my other IPs. So I think I'm going to do one more kind of a cyborg girl, the one of the terminal velocity angels. So it'll be kind of a more of a sexy drawing. And then after that, I'm going to do I think a werewolf. One of the other IPs or playlists on my YouTube channel is called Shadow Forge, and there you'll be able to find old folklore stories and history stories. Cool history though, and and then also some other like paranormal and other fun stuff. So that werewolf actually will be a folklore story, and so yeah. But as far as after that, please leave. I'm curious to hear what's popular. That's been actually one of the big things. Is like, well, what should I draw? I guess right now, like I said, I'm just doing drawings for my IP, but it's hard to get people to like your original stuff. Most people like what's already popular. So, I've been debating doing some, things that are already popular or the latest movies that are out or something. But yeah, comment, let me know what you guys might want to see, and then that might help me gauge what kind of content I should, be putting up. Well, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the drawing, and I'll just let the music play. Actually, on second thought, I decided to just shorten the video or speed it up a bit. It was kind of carrying on for a bit. So, no music today. Plus, I don't really have the time. Usually, I record my own soundtracks with guitar and all that stuff, but I need to try to get this out. It's been a few days, so I need to keep that content rolling out. All right, take care.